So yesterday we finished the chapter, the First World War, and today we will be starting the Second World War that was from 1939 to 1945. Now, uh, the First World War came to an end in 1918. The world heaved a sigh of relief, but it was not known that after 20 years there would be another war which would be even more disastrous than the first one. So the Second World War took place just 20 years after the First World War ended, and it was far disastrous than the first one. The League of Nations failed to establish peace in the world, like we have United Nations nowadays. At that time, after the First World War, League of Nations had come up, but it could not stop the war. When Hitler came to power in Germany, he refused to accept the Treaty of Versailles. So we have studied that after Germany was defeated, it had to sign the Treaty of Versailles, and it was accepted by the people of Germany. But later on, when Hitler came to power, he said that he won't recognize this treaty. He started the expansion of his empire and increased his military power. So at that time, it was decided under the treaty that the military or the army of Germany could not exceed the number of 1 lakh, but Hitler started to increase that. Soon Europe was divided into two rival groups. As it happened during the First World War, the same thing happened now also. Europe got divided into two rival groups as a result of his aggressive policy, of Hitler's aggressive policy. The Cold War began, and in 1939 it culminated in the Second World War. Cold War means there was differences amongst the nation, there was differences between them, and anything could have happened. They were not having an actual war, but some kind of occurrence was there. Some skirmish was taking place at one time or the other. So, coming to the causes of the Second World War, which is in your syllabus, it's very much there, the causes of the Second World War. So, the following were the chief causes of the Second World War, and we will discuss them one by one. So, the first one is dissatisfaction with the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, by which the First World War came to an end, was one sided. As I told you earlier also that when Germany got defeated, it had to sign the treaty. And it was very much one-sided. Lot of restrictions were imposed on Germany. It was a dictated peace and Germans were forced to sign it. Means they were dictated that you have to sign it, and ultimately they had to sign it. The defeated nations, especially Germany, had to cede many of her territories. So it had to give lot of her territories which were taken away by the victorious countries, and all her colonies were forcibly taken away from her. And whatever colonies it had established in Africa or some other places, they were taken away. They were taken away by the other victorious countries. Germany was divided into two parts for the benefit of Poland. To help Poland, to give relief to Poland, what was done? Germany was divided into two parts. She was burdened with huge war indemnity which she could never pay. Then a lot of debt was imposed on Germany that you have to pay this much fine. Because it was considered that the Germans had started the war, So they were asked to pay a lot of money to the victorious countries. Her military power was considerably reduced. So we have studied that she could not maintain any air force, no submarines she could have, and the army was limited to the number of 1 lakh. It could not be more than that. So these all restrictions were imposed on Germany. Then the treatment meted out to her was based on the spirit of revenge. It was a kind of revenge that since it's you who started the war, now you have been defeated, we have imposed this restriction upon you, and we are taking a sort of revenge. Consequently, that treaty created hatred in the minds of the Germans. So later on, what happened? The Germans, they became very angry, and it created hatred in them. It was a black spot for the Germans, and they wanted to wash it away. So they considered it a black spot. A black spot means they considered it very bad. So they wanted to do away with it. This could never be done without armament. So this was only possible if they could win a war. Without that, it wasn't possible. And as such, war become quite inevitable. And as a result, war became inevitable, unavoidable. Means without war, nothing could be established. So it was unavoidable. Due to these reasons, the war, the Second World War, it was one of the major causes of the Second World War. Dissatisfaction with the Treaty of Versailles and the coming of Hitler to power. Now, if you are asked about dissatisfaction with the Treaty of Versailles, you will have to explain everything. That the Treaty of Versailles was one-sided, lot of restrictions were imposed on Germany. Germany could not have an army more than 1 lakh. It could not have any air force. Submarines were not allowed. Then it had to cede so many territories of its to the victorious countries. All her colonies were forcibly taken away by the victorious country. So all this thing has to be mentioned. Remember this. Then the second point is rise of Nazism in Germany. So Nazism is racist or authoritative belief that we are the best. The democratic government could not succeed in Germany because of the French behavior. So the French somehow they behaved in such a way that no democratic government could come up in Germany. So what happened? It gave rise to dictatorship in Germany. When you don't have democracy, what happens? Dictatorship comes up. A person becomes the leader of the country and he controls everything. So, so the Nazi party easily progressed under the leadership of Hitler, and ultimately it gained power. By 1934, he took all the powers into his own hands and became the dictator of Germany. So ultimately, what happened? That Hitler, who was a member of the Nazi party, his party gained prominence and he became the leader of Germany and the ultimate dictator. So he rejected the Treaty of Versailles. We have read about that the Treaty of Versailles was one-sided, Germans were dissatisfied, and when Hitler came to power, he rejected to accept it. He said, now no more of this treaty, and increased his military power, and he started to increase his military power. He fortified the Rhineland. Now, it was decided at that time that the Rhine Valley, the area of the Rhine Valley was divided, and and it was said that Germans could not build any troops were there. Any, but he started to fortify that, to bring troops and armaments were there, and annexed Austria. And then he attacked and captured Austria, Switzerland, and Czechoslovakia. So he captured these countries, etc., into his own empire. He wanted to regain the old glory and prestige of Germany. So he knew that at one time, they knew that at one time Germany had been such a big country and was respected all over the world. He wanted to regain that glory. So he started this. Uh, he said that I won't accept this Treaty of Versailles anymore, and started to annex territories and make it a world power. In order to achieve its objectives, the Nazi Party followed the path of war. So the one thing it was left, it could do was it started or it indulged in war. It started uh, having war. Then the third point is rise of fascism in Italy. So one is rise of Nazism in Germany, and the other point is rise of fascism in Italy. What happened? Fascism means you are unite. Means they believe in 3 points. One is unity, the other is strength, and the third is authority. So unity is strength and authority. It should go together. Italy joined the Allies in the First World War with high hopes, but she was not satisfied with the territories she gained. Whatever territories she was given, she was dissatisfied with it. Consequently, dictatorship was established there under the leadership of Mussolini. So, as Hitler became the dictator of Germany, similarly, Mussolini became the dictator of Italy. He introduced many reforms and put a new life in the people of Italy by giving military training to them. So he started to give his people military training, compulsory military training. Means you have to serve in the force, maybe for 2 years or 3 years. It depends on the condition which they would have decided. He introduced many reforms. He wanted to revive the glory of old Roman Empire. So at one time, Italy was a part of the great Roman Empire. He wanted to make Italy that only. So he started that. Italy, like Germany, adopted an aggressive policy and captured Abyssinia and Albania. So what happened? Italy also captured these territories. Like Germany captured some territories, Italy also progressed on the same path. It also started very aggressively and captured these territories. Like Hitler, Mussolini's aggressive policy gave a severe blow to League of Nations. And the League of Nations, which was a body to look to maintain peace in the world, could not do anything and created an atmosphere of hostility in the world. So hostility was created in the world. Now coming
Ayush Kumar, disturbing your camera.
to the fourth point, Japanese policy of expansion and invasion of China. This is also a very important point which led to the Second World War. So there were many reasons due to which the Second World War started. So we are going to study it. Another cause of the war was the Japanese policy of expansion. The ambitions of Japan increased after the First World War. So what happened after the First World War? Japan started to a policy of aggression and started to increase its territory. Though Japan and China fought on the side of the Allies in the First World War, it had fought against Germany along with China. But what happened? Yet Japan got more concessions than China. China didn't receive that much concession as Japan. After the Second World War ended, she developed her own navy, and by 1930, she greatly increased her strength. So, see, in all cases, you can say that unless you improve your strength, your army, your navy, your air force, you can't gain prominence if you have to fight. So when it increased its strength, it started attacking others. So in 1931, she attacked China and seized Manchuria. So it attacked China and seized a part of its territory. Again, there was a war between Japan and China in 1937. Many Chinese cities fell into the hands of Japanese. So Japan was also creating a lot of problem at that time. During the Second World War, Japan joined the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo Axis. Why it is called the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo Axis? Any at that time, Germany, Italy, and Japan, they were on one side. So it's known as, that's why it's known as Rome, Berlin, Tokyo axis, and entered the war in 1941. So Japan entered the war in 1941 to satisfy her hunger for more territory. She wanted to gain more territories, and that's why she entered the Second World War. Japanese ambitions in the Pacific came into conflict with the United States of America. So in the Pacific Ocean also, it wanted to increase its power, it wanted to increase its territory, and that brought it in conflict with the United States, because the United States was a major power which was controlling most of the areas of the Pacific. Secret treaties were signed among the fascist powers. So secretly they signed treaties amongst themselves. Japan was given a free hand in Asia, means you can do whatever you want. That means free hand. So Japan was given that to do whatever it wanted, while Germany and Italy were given a free hand to expand in Eastern Europe and Africa. While Germany and Italy, they secretly decided that they can expand as much as they wanted in Europe and Africa, while Japan can do as much expansion as it wanted in Asia. That was decided amongst themselves, uh, among them. Now, see, there's another point which led to the Second World War, that is America's aloofness from European politics. But that's not in your course, so we don't need to do it. As I told you, the council has reduced the syllabus, so there's no need to do it. Okay. Then policy of appeasement. Policy of appeasement is also, we can leave. Okay. Uh, we can come to this failure of the League of Nations. This is very important. So, as I told you, that League of Nations was established, which was to monitor that there was no conflict amongst the countries, and if any kind of conflict occurred, then it was the duty of the League of Nations to look into those matters and get it solved and solve it. So it failed in that. Let's study this. The League of Nations was set up to maintain peace in the world. So why was this League of Nations formed? It was formed to maintain peace in the world and to prevent wars. but it proved quite weak and to failed her objectives. So it proved to be very weak and could not fulfill the objective why it was for. She did not have military power to implement her decisions and to punish the defaulters. She knew, the League of Nations knew that this country is at fault. It's troubling the other one. But she could not do anything. She could just only condemn it. But the League of Nations didn't have a force of its own that it could have sent it and punish the culprit. So it was not possible with the League of Nations. That's why it failed in implementing peace all over the world. Okay. Again, there was a lack of cooperation among the member nations, and they wanted to use the League for grinding their own axes. So one thing is that it didn't have the power, and the second thing is that the member countries, there was no cooperation amongst them, and all of them wanted to use the League of Nations as a tool to settle their own personal scores. So the League of Nations failed. It is rightly said, while the founding fathers of the League undermined it from within, the nationalists, militarists, and fascists were attacking it openly from without. What happened when Italy annexed Abyssinia, Japan annexed Manchuria, and Germany annexed Austria and Czechoslovakia? The League of Nations could not take any action against them. So, what could have the League of Nations do? It didn't have a force of its own. So, it started condemning it. But the annexers or those people who were the main culprits, they were not listening to it. So it failed in its mission. So the member nations lost faith in the League and started preparing the war materials on a large scale. So what it led to? It led to that the other countries, they thought that this League of Nations is useless. It can only condemn and shout and nothing. It can't solve the problem. So it's better to solve our problems on our own. They started raising their own means, increasing the power of their army as well as armaments, the quality of their armaments, so that they could defend themselves. And when you have arms and ammunition, it leads to um, trying and gain power over other countries. That's what it led to. So this was one of the reasons which led to the Second World War. Now coming to the immediate cause, then we won't discuss the Rome, Berlin, Tokyo axis. I told you about it, that Rome, Berlin, Tokyo axis means that these three countries formed a pact that they would stay together, and if any country attacks them, all the three of them will fight together against that country. So it came to be known as Rome, Berlin, Tokyo axis. Then coming to the immediate cause, so as we did in the First World War, there was an immediate cause of it. In the Second World War also, there were so many causes, but the World War started due to this. What was that? Hitler's invasion of Poland. So what had happened? In 1938, Germany demanded the city of Danzig in Poland, which had considerable German population. Now, before the partition or before Germany got defeated in the First World War, it had this territory. And after the First World War, this territory was taken away from it. But this territory contained a lot of Germans in it, as Danzig would provide a corridor through Poland connecting Prussia with the rest of Germany. And if Germany would have got this territory back, Danzig, then what would happen? it would have connected Prussia with the rest of Germany. It would have been very easier for Germany. Germany had lost these areas after the First World War. As I told you just now that it had lost it, they were taken away from it. Moreover, Poland was accused of committing atrocities against the Germans living there. It was brought to the notice that those Germans who were living in that area of Benzing, what had happened, lot of atrocities. They were humiliated. Lot of wrong things were being done to them by the Polish people, by the people of Poland. So Britain and France had by now become apprehensive at the rapid growth of German power. So Germany was increasing its military power. Now these two countries, Britain and France, they became apprehensive. They started to think that something might happen. Why is it increasing its power so much? So it can do something. So when they became apprehensive, they decided that if Polish independence was threatened, they would stand by Poland. There was no pact with Poland, but they, on their own, to curb the might of Germans, they decided that if Poland is attacked by Germany, what they would do, they would stand with Poland. They would help Poland in any case. Both these countries, England and France, they decided it, and even fight a war if necessary. And if a war is necessary, unavoidable, they will even fight a war with Germany due to Poland, on the side of Poland. Since neither France nor Britain could directly come to Poland's aid, now the territory was such that they could not directly come to Poland. What they decided, the only alternative was to form an alliance with the Soviet Union, which shared a large frontier with Poland. So Russia had a lot of Russia's boundary and Poland's boundary were common, almost common. They shared a common boundary. So uh, England and France directly could not come to the aid of Poland. They wanted that they should enter into some kind of treaty, some kind of alliance with the Soviet Union so that they can help Poland. But the policy of appeasement had convinced Soviet Union that Britain and France were using Germany against it. Now we skip the policy of appeasement. I'll go through it a little bit so that you may know about it. So this policy of appeasement had convinced Russia that Britain and France were using Germany against it. That's why Russia didn't enter into an alliance with these two countries, Britain and France. Moreover, Poland had been pursuing anti-Soviet policies, and on the other hand, Poland was following anti-Soviet policies. So why was Soviet Union going to help Poland? So it was not in favor of that. On 23rd August 1939, the Soviets and the Germans signed a mutual non-aggression pact. Now, mutual non-aggression pact was very important. It was signed between Russia and the Soviet Union. See, Russia is a country now. Earlier, it was a part of Soviet Union. All these countries, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Russia, so many countries, they were a part of Soviet Union. So Soviet Union signed a pact with Germany. It was known as Mutual Non-Aggression Pact, in which they promised not to attack one another. They promised that they won't attack anyone. Means Germany won't attack Russia, or and at the same time Soviet Union won't attack Germany. Secretly, they agreed to invade and occupy Poland, and secretly they decided that they should invade and occupy Poland also, each taking half of the country. It was secretly decided between them. It was not signed, but it was a secret thing, a matter between them, that you invade Poland and we should divide the territory between the two of us. The Soviet Union was to get back the Balkan states, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, which had gained independence after the First World War. So these states had gained independence. It were a part of Soviet Union. It wanted it back. This treaty also gave the Soviet Union valuable time to prepare for an eventual confrontation with Hitler in Eastern Europe. Because later on, what happened? Although they had signed a pact that they won't fight against one another, but later on, Germany attacked Russia. So the pact was broken. That's why it's given that it gave the Soviet Union a valuable time so that it could strengthen itself against and ultimately fight against Germany when Germany attacked it. This treaty also, yes, we did this. By this treaty, Hitler got Russian neutrality during Germany's attack on Poland. So, what was the achievement of Hitler by this treaty? That he got an assurance from Russia that if he would invade Poland, Russia was not going to do anything. It was not going to attack Germany. Since Britain and France had no direct access to Poland, Britain and France could not have come to Poland's rescue because it was landlocked from different sides and they could not approach it without entering some other country. German victory was certain. On 1st September 1939, Germany attacked Poland. Hitler did not think that Britain and France would help Poland, but 2 days later, on 3 September, Britain and France declared war on Germany. The Second World War began. So, what happened? That Germany declared war on Poland, it attacked Poland, and it knew very well that England and France could not come to Poland's rescue. But just after 2 days, when it attacked Poland, what happened? England and France, they declared war against Germany. So what happened? It has started the Second World War. This was the immediate cause of the Second World War, Hitler's invasion of Poland. So this much, and then we can do this also. Events of the Second World War, just a paragraph of it. We don't need to do entry of USA into the war. Okay. The Second World War started on September 3, 1939, and many countries, small or big, took part in it. Germany, Italy, Japan, Romania, etc., formed one bloc and were known as the Axis powers. So remember this, that Germany, Italy, Japan, Romania, etc., and they formed a group and they came to be known as the Axis powers. And on the other hand, there were 80 small or big nations. My God, see, the World War, Second World War was fought on such a huge scale that 80 countries, big and small ones, like the prominent among them, England, France, America, etc., who were known as the Allies. Okay, so the Axis powers and the Allies. In the beginning, Russia was on the side of Germany, but she joined the Allies later on. But she also joined the Allies, means England, France, America, Russia came all together. The war that started between two groups continued from 1939 to 1945 and is known as the Second World War. And this is called the Second World War. After some initial success of the Axis powers, they had to accept defeat in 1945. Initially, they got some success. Means the Axis powers, the countries belonging or forming a part of the Axis powers, they got some success, but ultimately they were defeated in 1945. Now see this entry of US into the war. We don't need to do this. Then fall of Italy, Germany, Japan, and bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. About bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it's not there. Then you don't need to do consequences or results of the Second World War that has been deleted by the um, council. So it's been reduced to a large extent, I'd say. Okay. So it's only this much.